All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I see some familiar faces and names and some new ones, so welcome. Just by way of introduction, Pomerol Partners is a data and analytics consultancy. We're a focus partner for Qlik, and we also have a wide range of additional partnerships, including NodeGraph. Somebody just asked if we were going to be sharing the webinar recording, and we absolutely will be sharing it. So anybody that registered will have access to it, and then we'll also probably post it on our website. So what we're going to talk about today, as I mentioned, is NodeGraph. I'm going to just go ahead and show my screen. So what NodeGraph is a data quality platform. A lot of people talk about them, and they talk about them in the context of the data lineage explorer, because that's kind of the most the sexiest of the functionality, where you get the lines showing you how your data is flowing through the different parts of your Qlik Sense environment. But there's actually a whole bunch of different aspects of Qlik Sense, or I'm sorry, of NodeGraph. NodeGraph can work with both Qlik View and Qlik Sense. So I'm going to start with just kind of a high-level overview of what's included in NodeGraph. Some of these things are add-ons or additional integrations. They're options, so you can see those at the bottom. And then some of them are part of the core product. So most of the demo is going to be focused on this core product. So we have a data catalog, similar in scope kind of to what Data Catalyst can do, only it's more reporting on stuff than it is allowing users to actually provision data sets. But it's really good when you've got a lot of different data sets in there for people to be able to go and find where different fields exist and what QVDs and Excel files that are sources, etc. The Dependency Explorer is that data lineage tool that we talked about. And again, we're going to go through each one of these in depth and demo them. The Field Explorer, great for tracking complete lineage information about a single field. So for those that have to do some kind of validation on their systems, it would be, it's great for the auditors to be able to see exactly where data is coming from, and you can even schedule it so that it's automated and you're constantly storing a new snapshot of what those fields look like to make sure that nothing has changed over time. And then you can set all of that up into different reports so that those reports, again, can be automated. The Data Quality Manager is an automated testing tool, so you can set it up to do regression testing. Again, for those industries that have a lot of potentially government oversight, or quality oversight. So it's a great tool for doing that testing. With us on the line is Owen Bott. He's one of our consultants. He's actually going to be going through the testing portion of the webinar today. I mentioned that the add-ons or integrations. So there is a scheduler for the documentation. So I can say I want to rerun my documentation every week to make sure that I track any changes that are happening. I can actually import and export data lineage. So I can use I can use NodeGraph as a complete lineage tool, and I can even get the lineage from other systems. If I was using a different ETL tool and I was tracking lineage of an ETL job, I could actually import that lineage. I can also take the lineage and I can export it from NodeGraph so that I could import that into a Calibra. Well, there's also a Calibra integration. But a Calibra, an Elation, et cetera, if I wanted to export that lineage. Fairly recent release is the end printing integration. So I can actually track from a source field in my data source or an Excel file all the way through to an end printing report. We can access NodeGraph Insights directly in Qlik Sense through an extension. I mentioned the Calibra integration before, and then the field tracker is what I mentioned, where you can actually track each one of those. And again, we'll get into a lot of this later. And then there's a full API that we'll talk about for when you start seeing some of the setup you'll understand why having an API is so important if I wanted to automate large amounts of file folders or apps, or create a whole list of tests and I wanted to do a lot of it and automate the creation of those. I can leverage those APIs to do a lot. So with that, I'm going to jump into the various components of the application. Again, feel free to hit the chat window if you have any questions. And then I'll jump through these. Then we'll have Owen jump through the data quality manager. Then we'll talk about the API and some of the setup, and then we'll take any questions at the end. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this data catalog. Very Google-esque kind of functionality. All right, so I just click on data catalog. I want to search for sales. All right, right now it's looking across everything, but I see sales exists as a field in QVD. There's also a field called sales rep as a QVD field. I can see which QVD it's coming from. I can also see if it's being tracked in the Lineage Explorer, and you can see that there's a wide number of results in here. I can see different expressions, so it's even checking in my master expressions for the word sales. If I just want to filter down to just say the QVDs, one of the things that I can note is there was a test that was run on the sales field in the customer info QVD, and I can also see that this is the popularity is cold, all right? So that means not a lot of people are using it. If I click into that, I'm going to get some additional detailed information about that, right? So whether it's been tested or not, how many connections there are to that customer info QVD. So in this case, 14 connections basically means there's multiple fields and they're being used. When it was last modified, how popular it is, where it's being used. So if I saw a QVD that I was expecting, if it was sensitive information, and I was expecting that to only go into one particular application, and I saw that it was being used in multiple different QVWs or QVFs, I would know that I should take a look at that, and then I can see whether it's used in content. So now I can also go into tracing that lineage. So I click on the Data Lineage Explorer, and what that's going to do is that's actually going to highlight the customer info QVD, and it's going to show me the source information. So where is the data coming from that's populating that QVD? It's also going to show me inside of each application where those fields are going, right? The other thing that you can do inside of here is if I just right click, I can also generate some documentation. So as we're looking at the lineage of different applications, I might want to show detailed documentation. And it's just pulling up in another window right now. So I've got detailed information about this QlikSense workshop addendum. I can see when the app was created, when it was last accessed and modified. I can see some information about the fields that are in the app, what tables, the number of unique values, etc. I can see all of the source files that are being used. I can see if there are any data sources. In our case, for our demo app, we really just focused on using Excel files for that. You can see that there's not any master dimensions or measures. I can see all of the sheets that are in there, the measures that are in there, and then I get into the lineage information again, all of the different levels of lineage information. So really, really good for creating that kind of required documentation for things like audits, etc. And then I can go through and I can just kind of reset the layout. So some of the other things that I can do inside of my Data Lineage Explorer, I can go in, I can open up an application, I can drill into, say, my category information and see where it's coming from. Couple of different ways, there are reasons why I might want to use this. And notice also there's forward and back arrows, so as I'm making different selections, I can kind of go through there or go back. I clicked on the wrong thing, so pretty handy to use that way. But one of the things that's come up with a lot of our clients over the years is, hey, I've got some sensitive information. I've either got margin information or I've got salary information, and I want to make sure that that information isn't getting into an application. So if I went in here and I had, if I had, say, some salary information and I clicked on it and I saw, oh, you know what, that's actually being used in an application, then I could go in and I could actually get more information about that. Now, one other thing with the data catalog that I neglected to mention, let's say I go into that same sales field, and let's go fields and expressions. So here I've got some information on that. I can click into it, and then I can actually click in there, and I can actually start adding comments in here. So I can say, this is a good field or a bad field. And so it's really handy for people using the system to kind of tell each other, like, what information is good and what information is bad. All right. We've currently got our server set up so that there's not authentication on it. So that's why this says that it's by anonymous. But typically you would set it up. You can set up the server so that it uses Active Directory, or you can use local storage of usernames, etc. All right, so so that's the data catalog aspect of it. Again, it comes in really handy when people are just trying to understand their environments. We use this a lot of times when we are going into new environments and just trying to get a greater understanding. The Dependency Explorer, a couple of things to note about the Dependency Explorer. When I'm setting this up, I have complete control over what these buckets look like how these things stack up, and then what all is included in here. So you notice that when you look at the SensDev apps, right now I only have 2 applications in here. If you go and you actually look at the server that this is pointing to, and you could point it to multiple servers, you'll notice that there's more than 2 apps in here, but there's also a whole bunch of streams. And if we just look at, say, our demo apps folder, and there's 30-ish applications in here, you can configure the lineage to only point to certain file folders. Right? So you don't necessarily have to look at everything in your environment. The other thing to note is, and we'll get into this when we get into the setup, but you can set up different containers. So I could set up a container for a development part of my server. I could set up another container for the production part of my server. I can set up a whole bunch of different containers so that they're more manageable and easier to use. All right. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the Field Explorer. So if I go into an application, or I'm sorry, into the Field Explorer application, I select one of my apps that's covered by this container. And I'm going to click into the workshop addendum. I can go into the orders table, and then I can click on that same sales field, and I'm going to see the entire lineage of where that field came from. right? Yeah, significantly easier than going and trying to pick through, if you're doing things by best practices, you would typically have a multi-tiered architecture where I would have an extract script, I would have a QVD layer, I may or may not have some transformed QVD layers, and then I would have my front end application. When you're trying to figure out where something is coming from, to try to pick through the code to find it is sometimes challenging. This is going to give you the ability to just quickly see exactly where that's coming from. So in this case, we know that sales is coming from this Qlik workshop Excel file, and we know where it's stored, et cetera. Owen, if maybe you could get ready to share here, and I'd like you to run through the testing functionality, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the integrations.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Owen Bott, and I am a consultant here at Pomerol Partners. One sec, I just share my screen. Okay. Awesome. So I hope everyone can see my screen. If not, please let me know. But one thing Fitz actually just brushed over a little quick. One thing in the Dependency Explorer you can do as well, or two things. You can go in the top of here, and in graphical options, you can choose to add in application content or users. Right now, I have the application content box checked, and basically what that shows is from my applications I have here, I can drill into exactly what is in those apps, whether that's master objects, sheets, or variables. And I can also see where those are coming from and how those are calculated. So you can see my category one. It's a master dimension. It's coming from this application, this QVD, all the way back to this file and that field. So it's a great functionality there. Another thing you can do as well, you can actually assign a heat map to show you a little bit more about your files and your fields. So a heat map is going to basically filter down by children, file size, fields, records, users, or even last modified. So say we're to do the last modified time. They give you a legend right down here on the bottom, and I can clearly see which files have not been reloaded in X number of days. As you can see, the green files have not been loaded in almost 2 years. So a clear indication that, hey, these files need to be to reloaded. So all the applications or the QVDs that are driven off those files will also be loaded as well. So now, yeah, going into the data quality manager. This is where we can explore and test our data through a series of tests in which the user can really create and define the parameters that they want. I will preface by saying that there's a multitude of APIs that we can use as well that we'll get more into after this to expedite the whole process on a larger scale as well. But once you go into the data quality manager, you're initially asked to create a project. A project in NodeGraph is essentially a container or grouping for your various tests or tasks. Projects basically just help organize your tests and represent the highest layer in the module. And I'll get a little more into what the other layers are in a second, but some common examples of projects you would typically see would be department specific, phase specific, or even app specific. So I'll just go through creating one real quick. So I'll just name one for sales project, and I'm going to create a tag on that. So if you searched and anything along those lines, and what's also really cool is I can assign notifications to this project as well. So whether that's through Slack, add in the URL, or through mail. So I'll just add in email, and there you go. Save, and now I have a new project. And up here in the top right, you can see which project you are testing against, so I can switch back and forth. But for the purpose of this, we're just going to stay in the first one. Next, we'll jump into the tests. So the tests are going to be there's a multitude of layers within this portion of it. So first thing you want to do when you come into a test is create a test case. A test case is a folder. So we're going to have a folder within your group, which is your project. So if I want to create a test, I'm going to just name it sales. Sales test case. So now I have a new test case. Once again, it's just a basic folder setup. It's not pointing at anything. There's no tasks assigned to it just yet. Now, say I want to point it at something I want to test. I just come in here and I hit add test item. So this is where I define what I want to test, meaning what I'm going to point at to test. So I can come in, I can pick a QVD, I can pick a file, I can pick a Sense application, even a database connection or baseline. There's a ton of different options. And you can really define these parameters exactly how you want to do it. But I'm going to go through and I am just going to choose an Excel file. Let's go to QVD. And I will name it sales QVD. And now I have the option to browse my path and pick the QVD I want to choose. I'm just going to choose this one. Save it down. Okay, and now I have this test case pointing at a specific QVD. So now what I want to do is create the actual parameters of the test that I want to run. So I'm going to come into the wrench icon again and add a test task. And with the test task is I also have several different options I want to run. So I want to come in and I'm going to say, I want to see if a certain field exists within that QVD. So I'm going to come in here, pick the exact field I want to see. So let's say I want to see if quantity exists. So Q2 question mark. I can come in here, type that in, and just hit save and evaluate. And it's going to give me a result. Set all fields found, quantity, perfect. I can add multiple fields here. I can really do whatever I want. There's a ton of different options. Say I want to get a little more in depth with what those tasks are. And I want to test how many rows are in a certain QVD. I'll come in here. I'm going to do record count. And number of records, give a quick description. Evaluate. So now I know that there are 2,289 records within this QVD. Okay, so that gives me a little more information. Now if I want to dig a little deeper, I can add another task saying, let's aggregate a field. Let's count how many order IDs are within that QVD. And give it a name as well. And I have the option to pick distinct or not. So I'm going to choose distinct order IDs. So save and evaluate. So from this test, I can tell that there are 953 distinct order IDs. If I were to uncheck that, distinct option, evaluate again, 2,289, the exact number of rows. So there's a ton of different options in which you can create these test tasks and items off of, really to define on how you want to set up your data quality management tool. It's completely up to your discretion. I here have created a few other examples that I can show you as well. So here, my test case is a workshop app. I'm pointing it at this sales analysis app. And I'm going to go through and I defined a few of the tasks I wanted to test. So this first one, I am evaluating whether this master measure is correct. So I have average quantity, and I know it should equal 23.9, and result 23.9. There we go. And I can check when something was last updated. So here, going in, when was this application last updated? Was it updated within the last hour? Let's find out. It failed. So it was last updated yesterday at 4:03 p.m. So clear indication that, hey, maybe I need to re-update this application. And I've done that for a few more examples, as you can see. One cool thing you can do, you can also apply set analysis in there as well. So I'm evaluating this expression, sum sales where employee name equals Elvis Presley. I'm going to evaluate. Elvis Presley has $70,000 worth of sales. Not too bad. But you don't have to go through each one and go into the wrench, edit, and evaluate themselves. You can also run them as a test case altogether. So one cool thing as well, you can reorder your test items in here to exactly how you want these to be defined. So say test item 1.3, I am selecting Elvis Presley from the field employee name. So I'm just saying, grab this selection from this field. Next, I'm going to say evaluate an expression. So I'm saying evaluate sum sales with a reference saying select Elvis Presley as the employee name. And that's all I did right here. I'm just referencing that earlier item to where it's picking that up and also going to evaluate the expression based off of that logic I'm defining. So I can structure these tasks in a way that makes sense for the test that I want to run. And I can just run it by hitting this play button. What I can also do as well to automate it, just come over here to this action section, hit edit schedule, come in here, I'm going to enable it. I can schedule it daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, and define the parameters I want to test on. I can also send myself notifications, whether it fails or all the time. The notification settings will be explained a little bit more in depth in the overall general settings of NodeGraph. But say I wanted a notification by email whenever this runs, and whether it's successful or fails, I'll get it every time it runs once a week. So if I wanted to run this test case, I would just hit run, job started, and as I can see, a few of them passed, a few of them failed. And now I'm going to make my next tests based off of those results. So there's a ton of different functionality there, and it's really how you want to define your data quality management tool to best situate your needs. One really cool thing as well, so what you can do is have a baseline. And what a baseline is essentially, I like to describe it best as like a concussion protocol. So if say you're a football player and before the season you go in and you take a test to answer a series of questions to where they can monitor your brain activity. And then throughout the season, if you were to get a head injury, no matter what that may be, you have some sort of reference point to go back to compare that brain activity. And the same can be said within data and within NodeGraph and your Qlik Sense or View applications. I'm going to come in, I want to create a baseline test to see if any changes have been made to my application throughout X number of days, whatever that may be. So I'll walk you through that process real quick. Creating a baseline test is super simple. Hit the plus, I choose an application that I want to choose from. Sales analysis right here, select use, and now just give it a name. Okay, so I have defined my baseline, but I have not created the model yet. Now to create the model, just wander on over to the model section, and I just hit update model. So what this just did, this uploaded the entire application, all of its sheets and all of its objects. It's going to tell me a little bit of information about each one. So all my objects have the ID, what type it is, if there's a title or not, where it is in the sheet ID, and I also have a state and action section over here as well. So this is the basis. I have not formed the baseline yet. If I wanted to create the baseline, I'm just going to hit create baseline. baseline has been created. Jump back here, just have to hit update. So it's updating the baseline to where I can run models against it. So I'm going to run it against itself to ensure that you can just see it right now. So as you can see, everything passed because it ran the baseline against the baseline. And what's really cool as well, I can disable certain aspects of the baseline I want to create. So for this application, for this app, sales analysis, I can pick and choose what I want the baseline to be of what's in there, what's going to be in there, what you expect to see in the future. So I'm just going to disable this associative difference sheet. And now that I'm going to disable the sales dashboard. And what this should do as well, if there are any objects tied to it, it will also disable them as well. And then I can just update the model. And now my baseline is created based off of that. So when I were to go back to tests, I can come in here. I already have one created, but I can go in here, hit run the baseline test, and schedule this baseline test over time to say, hey, I have a team of employees or a team of developers that go in and do a bunch of edits. I need to ensure that my application isn't changing, or I just need to be aware if there were any changes to it and receive a notification as to what exactly changed on both the sheet and object level. This is the perfect example of where I would do that. I would just create an action to schedule a time, and I can schedule it to be every week, every month, every year, whatever that may be. It's great for auditing reasons or great for internal development of your apps as well. And Fitz, I will kick it back over to you so you can explain the API process and how this process can all be streamlined through the power of APIs.
Good deal. Thanks, Owen. Just go ahead and share here. I neglected to mention reports. So there's a bunch of canned reports for governance and for improving your NodeGraph presentation that I wanted to show. I don't know how closely everybody was paying attention, but there were a couple of QVDs that were being used that did not have any incoming links, but they were being used in an application. When you use the data manager to create a Qlik app, it's automatically going to pull some geo information. So the country geo information and the country aliases, those are QVDs that come out of the box with the Qlik installation. So I can easily see that. Now, if you were pointing at your file structure, it could come in handy to say, like, look, I've got some QVDs that nothing is feeding them, and so they're not getting updated on a regular basis. So that's one example. I could show QVDs that had incoming links but no outgoing links. So again, we're burning processing power for something that we're not actually using. So these are kind of helpful ways or helpful things that we can use to just test the quality of our overall QlikSense environment. Show me stuff that hasn't been reloaded within X number of days. So we can see those QVDs. We can also see our NodeGraph demo app has not been reloaded in over a day. So things that I might want to look into. The other thing that we can do, remember when we're in this data lineage or the dependency explorer, if you were to go into a file folder that had hundreds of different files in there, then this information starts to become challenging to look at. So we want to make sure that the way that we're structuring things in the containers, as NodeGraph calls them, we want to make sure that it becomes easy to use. So to improve the presentation, we can show different file folders that have more than X number of files in there. So in this case, here's all of our different file folders, the number of files in there. I can also show any files that are included, but they're not included in any rules. So remember, we're trying to make it more manageable by the way that we set things up, but we also want to make sure that we don't overlook some stuff. So as you'll see in the setup, we can set different filter criteria for that. And then some other information about our Qlik solution, top 10, bottom 10 apps, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So before I jump into the setup, just wanted to go into that API that Owen mentioned before. All right, so this is the full documentation. So you'll notice that we're just running this documentation from our server. So if you have the add-on for the API, you've got the ability to go in and automate this entire process. All right, so there's information on basically, give me a list of all of the baseline tests. I can create a new baseline test or delete them. As you can see, when I'm setting up just different test projects, I can again create projects, create test items, test tasks, etc. All right, so when you're talking about a larger environment where you might have hundreds of different applications and a whole bunch of things that you might want to test, this becomes a handy way to automate that process and really push a whole bunch of information into the testing platform. And you can see that there's other things that you can do with setting up rules and changing other settings and doing all of this programmatically. So we'll go through very quickly. I know we're about 20 minutes until the end. So the last thing that we wanted to cover was just how do we set up the data catalog and the dependency explorer. So just go into the settings. You see here, I've got a list of containers. In our case, we only have one container, but I can go and I can add as many as we want to. You'll see I can put a tag in there. So if you were watching when we went through the data catalog, all of those items were tagged as dev, and this is where you would set that up. I can add in unreferenced sense applications. You might want to use a little bit of caution when you use that unreferenced sense applications, because that's going to pull in potentially every single application in your environment, which will cause the build process to take a long time. So we'll show you the build process because we've slimmed this one down quite substantially. The ability to export that lineage that we talked about. So if I wanted to use a third-party product for exploring lineage, I could export that. Here's where that data is going to end up when I export the lineage. And then I can just automatically sync the data catalog after I do the build. All right, so that's the setup of what they call the container. So I'll click on save on that. Then I can go into categories. So each of the categories is going to have just some high level information. It's very similar to the way that testing was set up. So I give the category a name. The layer is basically which one of the columns it's going to show up in. All right, and then I can sort it within that layer. All right, so you'll notice that I have files without rules. That shows up first, and then I've got Excel, and then I've got data sources. So that's how that sort order works. Is this would basically be 0, this would be 1, this would be 2. All right. Or in this case, the files without rules actually showed up as 0, or I guess -1. So it sorted first. But once I have that category, then I can go and I can add different rules. So I'm going to show you the rule that we created. This particular one was a directory rule, and I called it just Excel files, and I gave it a file path. And I also can choose whether I'm scanning all the subfolders or not. And I can choose which file types I actually want to include from each file folder, or I can exclude different files in different folders. So I can set up multiple rules if I want to in each one of these. And some other examples of things that we did. So in this case, we've got data sources. Our particular application, if you noticed in the Lineage Explorer, we don't have any data sources because we're just pulling from Excel files, but it would actually show all of our data sources and show SQL connections, etc. And we can go and interrogate that information. We set up another category for extract and transform. This one's kind of interesting because it's a sense application rule. All right, so it's just going to look for sense applications. You can also look for QVWs and QVFs using some of the other rules. But in this case, we put in the name of the stream that we were concerned with. So we have this demos NodeGraph extract. So it's really only looking at these two files in this particular rule. I can also choose to tag the files again here if I want to, so that I know where the information is coming from. I can put in just specific applications if I want to. So by the GUID, I can do that, or I can exclude specific applications by the GUID. Here's a list of our QVDs. Again, we're looking at just our QVD file path, and we want to exclude this incremental QVD. We only want to include QVDs when we're getting this. So a lot of flexibility about how exactly we're setting this up and being able to filter down. And then we've got our sense dev apps rule. Again, it's just a sense application rule. Now we're looking at basically the front end applications. Right? So best practice, we'd have some extractors, and then we'd also have some front end applications. So this is how we can set it up so that it makes sense in the UI. The other thing that we can do in here is we can create groupings. So the way that our demo data is structured, we actually have a set of QVDs that's ordered by year. And so they follow the format of orders, 2012, 2013, 2014. So we can actually use that to group those files together so that they show up as one, rather than having them show up as multiple different sources within the data set. So if I go and I look at my QVDs, here's my orders by year, and here's that group that I set up. So you can see there's 2013 through 17 are different QVDs, but it's logically grouped together, which again improves the ease of actually looking at the data lineage. So with that, I will pause. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them into the chat window, and we will certainly answer them to the best of our ability. Not seeing any questions at this point. So with that, I'll say thank you, Owen, for the help, and I hope everybody has a great day. And again, feel free to email us if you do think of any questions afterwards. We'll probably follow up with a link to the recording and some additional information on NodeGraph. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.